Welcome to Dusky Lore. Close your eyes, dim the lights, and listen closely as the shadows begin to speak. Story 1. Several years have passed, but the memory remains etched in my mind as if it had happened yesterday. Not long ago, something made me think about it again, and I even asked my wife whether I had imagined it, because it was that unusual. But no, she remembered it exactly the same way. It was a sweltering night, pushing close to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, even though the sun had been down for hours. My wife and I were driving along a quiet road just north of the Mexican border, a stretch of asphalt we traveled almost every day. It was familiar to us, but that night it felt strange in a way I could not explain. The road was practically empty, with a tall wall on one side and on the other an open field scattered with large rocks. The lighting was poor and there were no cars in sight. We usually had music playing, but the radio had been malfunctioning, cutting in and out, so we turned it off. That left us surrounded by a heavy silence, hearing only the sound of the tires against the pavement. It was one of those nights when the air feels too still, too quiet, as if something were waiting to happen. That was when we saw him. A man was lying face down in the ditch right at the edge of the curb. He was wearing a light blue button-up shirt, blue jeans, and brown shoes. Completely normal clothes, nothing ragged or torn. What struck me was that his clothes were clean. If he had collapsed there or if a car had hit him, there should have been dirt, blood, something. But he looked spotless, as if someone had carefully placed him there. It all happened in a matter of seconds, though it felt as if time were slowing down. My wife immediately said we needed to stop and check whether he was breathing. Out of instinct, I eased off the speed, but my gut was already screaming that something was wrong. Before I even thought it through, I told her, "Stay in the car." She must have heard the edge in my voice because she did not argue. Instead, she started looking around, trying to catch what I had sensed. That was when we really noticed the details. There were huge boulders from the field that had been dragged close to the road, but not naturally. There were fresh dirt marks, as if someone had moved them recently. And just beyond the rocks, a faint blue light flickered. It looked exactly like the screen of a phone being held low, close to the ground, barely out of sight, as if someone were watching us. The moment I looked directly toward it, the light disappeared. I did not hesitate. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. The car lurched forward and I felt my heart pounding in my chest as we sped away. I instinctively glanced in the rearview mirror, and that was when I saw them. 5 men suddenly stepped out from behind the boulders. They had been waiting. They had been watching. And when they realized their trap had failed, they stopped mid-step, standing there motionless in the dark, watching us drive away. One of them bent down and helped the man in the ditch to his feet. He was fine. The whole thing had been staged. For several minutes, we did not say a word. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles had turned white. My wife sat rigid in her seat, eyes wide, breathing too fast. When we reached our destination, I grabbed the phone immediately and called the police. I gave them the exact location, described what had happened, and waited for some kind of urgent response. Instead, the officer on the other end sounded tired. "Yes, we'll check it out," he said, without the slightest hint of urgency in his voice. It was clear they were not going to do anything at all. I was still shaken from the rush of adrenaline when a few days later, I saw a report on the news. There had been an attack in the city late at night. A driver had stopped after seeing a man lying in the road, thinking he was injured, and was immediately ambushed by several attackers. Somehow the victim managed to escape. The news did not specify the exact location, but I knew it was that same road, that same setup. It could have been us. Even now, years later, I still wonder what would have happened if I had stopped, if I had gotten out of the car, if I had not noticed the rocks, the phone light, that strange feeling in my stomach. We were seconds away from a completely different ending. Story 2. About 6 years ago, my friend Tom and I decided to go to a casino on an Ojibwa reservation. We were staying at my parents' cabin that weekend, and since the casino was about 40 minutes away, we figured it would be a good way to kill some time. Maybe win a little money and get a good meal out of it too. The drive there was easy enough, but that stretch of highway was unsettling at night. Completely surrounded by dense forest, no street lights, and barely any traffic. Just a long, dark road with our headlights cutting through the blackness. The night at the casino went pretty well. We won some money, played at a few tables, had a great dinner, and before we realized it, it was already past 1 a.m. Definitely later than I would have liked, considering how dark the drive back would be. But there was not much we could do about it, so we got in the car and headed back. For the first 20 minutes, we did not see a single vehicle, just the road, the trees, and every so often the distant flash of some animal. Then, just as we were approaching a hill, I noticed something reflecting in the darkness. 2 green orbs at the side of the road. Deer. I hit the brakes and waited. Sure enough, a small herd crossed in front of us. Once they were safely out of the way, I started moving again, slowly up the hill, since we had just come to a stop. The moment we reached the top, Tom suddenly blurted out, "Holy!" Right in front of us, walking straight down the middle of our lane, was a young woman. She was about 30 feet away, moving toward us. I slammed on the brakes again, and we stopped barely 10 feet from her. But that was not even the most disturbing part. She was barefoot, wearing a thin white nightgown. Her jet black hair hung down her back, and she did not react at all. She just kept walking, expressionless, completely unfazed. Tom and I were frozen. It was one of the creepiest things I had ever seen, like something straight out of a horror movie. We expected her to stop, maybe come up to the window and ask for help, but she did not. She walked right up to my car, her blank stare fixed straight ahead, and without hesitating dragged her hand along the driver's side door. As she passed us, the sound of her fingers scraping against the metal sent chills down my spine. Tom panicked immediately. "Dude, let's go, let's get out of here." And honestly, every instinct in me was screaming the same thing, but something felt off. I do not know if it was guilt, curiosity, or just the sheer absurdity of it all. But I could not shake the feeling that I needed to check if she was okay. I looked in the rearview mirror. She was still walking down the road, moving as if in a trance. I turned to Tom and said, "I'm going to ask if she's okay." Tom snapped his head toward me. "Are you crazy? Drive, leave her alone." But I had already made up my mind. I turned on the hazard lights, opened the door, and stepped out. The interior lights barely helped, but the amber flash of the hazards let me make out her silhouette as she moved down the hill. I hesitated for a second and then, half shouting, called out, "Hey, are you okay?" She stopped. She did not turn around, did not move. She just stood there, completely still. The silence stretched on for too long. Tom, now fully terrified, got out of the car and came around the hood to stand next to me. We stood there, waiting. Then she screamed. It was a loud, high-pitched, inhumanly shrill scream. We did not wait to find out what came next. We ran back to the car, jumped inside, and sped out of there. Tom scolded me the entire way back to the cabin. "I told you not to stop. What the hell was that? That woman was not normal." And honestly, I had no way to argue with him. We did not see a single car for the rest of the drive. To this day, I still have no idea what that was. Was she lost under the influence of something, sleepwalking, or was it something else entirely? The only thing I know for sure is that I'd never want to witness anything like that again. Story 3. I was 18 years old and finally heading back home to California for summer break after finishing my sophomore year of college. It was a 9-hour drive, so I did what any young, reckless, caffeine-fueled college student would do. I stocked up on energy drinks, sodas, and snacks to keep myself awake. I left pretty late, right after having dinner with some friends, with the plan of driving through the night and arriving in the morning. Everything was going smoothly and I was making good time. I was about 3 hours from home, around an hour from Reno, on one of those desolate stretches of highway where you do not see another car for miles. And of course, that was when the energy drinks caught up with me. I suddenly had an urgent need to pee, and I instantly regretted not stopping at the last gas station 45 minutes earlier when I had the chance. Just when I thought I would have to pull over and water a bush, I saw a rest area sign up ahead. Perfect. I took the exit and parked. The lot was nearly empty except for 2 vehicles. A beat-up sedan that had clearly seen better days, and a Sprinter-style van parked farther off to the side. I did not think much of it. I was laser-focused on making it to the bathroom before embarrassing myself. I hurried inside, did my business, and was just about to flush when I heard the restroom door creak open. I froze. I am not a small guy, but I am not built for fighting either. 1,000 horror movie scenes flashed through my mind as I braced for some Michael Myers-type scenario. I slowly pushed open the stall door and saw a normal guy standing by the urinal. Average height, wearing mechanic-style coveralls smeared with grease stains. He looked up, gave me a friendly smile, and went back to what he was doing. I exhaled and told myself I was being paranoid. I went to the sink, washed my hands, and was about to leave when he suddenly spoke. His voice was deep and raspy like a heavy smoker's. "Do you like dogs, bro?" he asked casually while scrubbing his hands under the faucet. I hesitated. Something about the way he said it felt off. Still not wanting to be rude, I forced a smile and replied, "Yeah, man, dogs are cool." Then I turned toward the door, ready to get out of there. Mistake. Before I had even taken a few steps outside, he was already behind me, practically on my heels. "I got a new puppy," he said with forced enthusiasm, way too eager. "Super cute. Want to see it?" Instant panic. My predator radar was screaming at full volume. I clenched my keys in one hand and my phone in the other, my mind racing through the worst possible scenarios. "No thanks. I need to get going," I blurted out, while fumbling to get into my car. But before I could shut the door, he grabbed it. He was strong, even though he was a little shorter than I was. He pulled the door with ease, leaving me trapped. Then he leaned in and said something that froze my blood. "By the time the cops get here, you'll already be dead." Every part of me screamed, "Run!" Without thinking, I kicked as hard as I could. My foot slammed into his stomach. The impact sent him stumbling backward, and I did not stick around to see what he did next. I yanked the door shut, locked it, and floored it out of there. As I skidded toward the exit, I saw him struggling back to his feet and running toward his car. I did not wait to find out if he was going to follow me. I just drove like hell, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds, convinced that at any moment I would see headlights racing up behind me on the highway. For the next 3 hours, my heart never slowed down. I was sure that at some point he would appear, run me off the road, and finish what he had started. When I finally pulled into my driveway, my dad was still awake waiting for me. I told him everything, still shaking and replaying every horrible scenario in my head. But instead of calling the police, he just shook his head. "There's nothing they can do now. You got away. That's what matters." Maybe he was right, but after that night, I never stopped at a rest area after dark again. Story 4. My mother, Lena, had a terrifying encounter in the late 1970s or early 1980s, long before I was born. She was in her 20s, living near Miami, Florida, and working on a club-style cruise ship as a casino dealer. Whenever she had the chance, she also sang, so her schedule was chaotic, and she often had to drive home at absurd hours. With that kind of lifestyle, it was probably inevitable that sooner or later she would have at least one very bad experience. On that particular night, it was around 2 or 3 in the morning, and she was driving home along one of those long, empty Florida highways, straight stretches that go on for miles without a single street light, surrounded by nothing but thick swampland. The kind of place where, if your car breaks down, you are in serious trouble. And of course, that was exactly what happened. One moment she was driving along just fine, and the next the engine sputtered and died. She pulled over onto the shoulder, turned the key several times, and got nothing but silence. There were no cell phones, no roadside assistance, and certainly no houses nearby. Just a dark, empty road and plenty of alligators lurking in the swamps. At first, she tried to stay calm. She thought she would just sit tight and wait for another car to pass by. Surely someone would stop to help, right? Wrong. Minutes passed, then an hour, and nothing. She began to realize that at that hour, most people would probably assume she was waiting for a drug deal, or that stopping to help her might put them in danger. Either way, no one wanted to get involved. Then finally, a car pulled over. It stopped about 400 feet behind her on the shoulder of the road, with its headlights still on. At first, she felt a wave of relief. Someone had actually stopped. Maybe they could help jumpstart the car or give her a ride into town. But the minutes passed and the driver did not move. He just sat there, engine running and lights glaring, completely still. Something was not right. She tried to explain it away. Maybe he was hesitating over whether to help or not. Maybe he was making a call. Maybe he was waiting for her to signal that she needed assistance. But deep down, she knew that was not it. Her heart started pounding in her chest. After almost 10 minutes, the driver's door slowly opened. A man got out. He was alone. He walked to the trunk, opened it, took something out, and started heading toward my mother's car. Slowly. Too slowly. No one moves like that if they are just coming over to offer help. That was when she saw what he was holding in his hand. A wrench. Not jumper cables. Not a gas can. Not a toolbox. A huge wrench gripped tightly in his hand. And he kept coming without saying a word. Every part of her body was screaming, "Run," but the car was dead, and she was trapped. She thought about running into the brush, but that would have been a death sentence too. Alligators, snakes, who knows what else. She thought about locking the doors and pretending she was not there, but he had already seen her. She was out of options. And then out of nowhere, a tow truck appeared. Its powerful lights lit up the entire highway as it drove past, slammed on the brakes, and made a U-turn. It pulled right alongside her, positioning itself between her and the man with the wrench. He turned around, ran back to his car, and took off. The tow truck driver got out, looked at her, and asked, "Are you okay?" She could barely get a word out. He helped her into the truck, and as they drove away, she finally managed to ask, "Why did you stop?" His response, "I saw the look on that guy's face. He wasn't coming with good intentions." That was it. No hesitation, no doubt. Just pure instinct that something was wrong. She never found out who that man was, what he intended to do, or what would have happened if the tow truck had not shown up. But she is convinced that if she had been alone for a few more minutes, she would not have made it home that night.